from what I don't want to, as Eric would say, if we're going to do this, we should, as Eric Weinstein would say, if we're going to do this, we should probably try to steel man him properly, and maybe he'll watch this, and I told him that we were going to do this, so, you know, hopefully it offers a little something for both of you guys. I never see him pushing the straight up idea of religion on people. Now, he is doing he's doing it through the prism that you described, the sort of Judeo-Christian prism of things, where he's talking about these stories. And what I sense that he's really hitting on that is resonating with people, and it does resonate with me even, is that the power of these stories, and maybe this is sort of the Joseph Campbell thing, the power of these stories does offer some other transcendent truth that you cannot get another way. So the way that I can give it to you in a way that sort of makes sense is to me is that, you know, although I didn't really like the last couple movies, that the amount that I've loved Star Wars in my life, the way that the stories of Star Wars, right, that those stories of Star Wars have more relevance to how I sort of view good and evil and the journey that you're on as a person. They have more value to me than anything that I ever read out of a biblical thing. So I'm not taking his biblical version of it, but that the power of story can somehow offer you some map to truth that I don't think necessarily is in conflict with anything you've said. Does that? No, I'm not giving you Pearly what his argument is. I'm just giving you sort of my personal take. Yeah, no, but I'm aware of what he's been saying in this regard. And, and I think this is where maybe you guys got a little lost in that first conversation that you had. I mean, so just as a general matter, I love much of what he says. He does, with some regularity, say something ridiculous enough with the same confidence he says all of the good things that I perceive a real problem with what he's doing. Can you give me an example of one of those just for... Well, I mean, did you see his event with Matt Dillahunty? Did you see that? I didn't see it, but I know a lot of people have been talking about it. Yeah, that's worth watching. But and again, I'm hoping, my hope is that we can make progress in these conversations where we don't get stuck just having a knockdown, drag out over things like the points I'm going to raise now. Because, but by the way, real quick, for the record, just I'm more than happy to tell you, like he, I think, is in that same exact spot. He wants it to be fruitful and friendly and all of those things, which I think goes back to what we talked about, an hour ago about just the way we all relate to each other. Right. But I mean, he'll confidently say things like, atheists aren't really atheists. I mean, like there's a real atheist is a psychopath who murders people. I mean, so those people have existed, but someone like Sam Harris or Richard Dawkins, or I mean, he said this directly to Matt Dillahunty in this case, they're not, they only think they're atheists, not really atheists. They have a God and that's functioning in their life, and they're just not acknowledging it, right? And again, it comes back to this historical claim that we all grew up in the West. We all just got our ethics and our theology without ever naming it. We got it in the water, right? And so any sense you have of what is good and worth doing, any sense you have of value, just the reason why it would be bad to murder somebody, the reason why you don't have to think that through from first principles every day, and you can just navigate this social space with other people in the West, it's because you are just fundamentally dependent on these stories, this tradition, right? And this God. And he's very, I don't know what the steelman interpretation of what he's actually doing is here, but to my eye, he's very either evasive or non-committal about what he means by God. But he's however he's using the word, he's not making a clear claim about what he believes. He'll often say, it would take me, 40 hours to answer that, or I wrote a 600-page book on that, and I can't. It's like he will decline to answer a fairly straightforward question about what he believes about Jesus or about God. Or right. So maybe you guys will get somewhere on that. He doesn't. I don't think. I think I could probably count on one hand how many times he's actually mentioned God specifically in the course of all this, because the stories and what he would say are the maps of meaning. I think are much more important to him than to agree on the exact definition of God. Yeah, but the claim, for instance, that I am in a way that I fundamentally don't understand, but he does, that I am captive of the Judeo-Christian tradition, right? That my ethics is born of it,
and that my notion of ultimate value is somehow anchored to Jesus, right? I mean, that is just so preposterous as to be unarguable, right?
But Shapiro would take a similar argument, just not related to Jesus, though. I think he would say something similar,
well,
right?
Because my mother was Jewish, presumably he would think I'm, Jewish rather than Judeo-Christian, right?
Right. Or that he would say that your Enlightenment values. I mean, I think when I've done this with him, he would say, if I say, well, all the goodness in me, the things that I believe in, the moral principles that I believe in are really Enlightenment values, he would say, well, you really have to dial it back to where
it's not proving the point he thinks he's proving with it, right? So it's, but these are like points of confusion that I think we could get past in 5 minutes, but it's also possible that he's going to dig in for 2 hours on this, and then we'll have 3 more events to do, and I'm not sure what the hell's going to happen. So, but I mean, I really hope to make progress with him, because again, I think what he's doing is very interesting on other fronts, and what he's exposed is a real need, a real hunger for a meaning-based conversation about how do you get your life straight in in the 21st century, and I mean clearly there's a hunger for wisdom that the secular community has not been answering in any kind of reliable way. And so when I hear from people who are saying, well, I've been an atheist, but what I'm hearing from Peterson is really causing me to get my life together. That just tells me that, I mean, it's no surprise. I've said this about atheism ever since I was talking about atheism. Yeah. Atheism is not a philosophy. Atheism is nothing. Atheism is just a denial of the false certainties of religious people. It's like, no, there's no good reason to believe in Poseidon, and there's no good reason to believe in Yahweh. That's atheism, right? So atheism doesn't give you anything that makes you live a meaningful life. And that's not, but the thing is, contra Peterson, that's not a knock on atheism. That's all the atheism. Atheism is just not being convinced by the bad evidence and arguments put forward by religious people. It leaves just a space for better conversations that you may or may not have, you may or may not discover, you may or may not fall in love with science and a rational approach to the contemplative life. I mean,
so in a weird way, as someone that wants to connect atheism to spirituality, the failure of whatever the atheist movement before you was, in a weird way, is kind of good, because you want to lead atheism to a future, right? Like,
well, I'm completely unconcerned by atheism. I'm concerned about the future, right? But it's like, but the place where Peterson and I will have disagreed and will disagree is, I mean, I don't think he understands atheism, or I've never heard him say anything that is an accurate portrayal of what it's like to be, this sort of atheist, or and certainly many atheists I know. Sort of reframing your experience. Yes, but the truth is, you can do that with stories that you know to be bullshit. Like you can do that with Batman.
Well, I'm telling you. I mean, I know Star Wars isn't a true story, but it has.
But you could decide, like, I'm gonna get up each morning and think of myself as Luke Skywalker. Like, you're not Luke Skywalker. Well. Luke Skywalker was invented by someone who in your lifetime. Right, so there's no some deep thing going back to our DNA, right? It's just Luke Skywalker, and you can do it. And perhaps perhaps Jordan would want to say, well, no, Luke Skywalker does go back to the DNA, because Joseph Campbell was really in touch with these ancient myths, and it was Joseph Campbell who gave George Lucas all of his story structure. Okay, leave it aside. You could do it with You pick the most preposterous character you want that could still conceivably be inspiring. Spider-Man, right? You could get up tomorrow and say, I'm just going to view each situation of the day that I encounter through the lens of, what would Spider-Man do? How would Spider-Man act here? I'm walking into a Starbucks, right? I feel sort of vaguely neurotic, right? I'm about to meet the barista, and I'm like, having trouble making eye contact, right? I'm the same neurotic person I was yesterday. But how would Spider-Man do this, right? Like, and how would if I knew that I could just take down everyone in this place if I wanted to, and I could shoot a web and fly over a building, right? If I knew that about myself, how would I navigate each subsequent moment here? the truth of the matter is that changes your psychology. You can do it with total fictitious bullshit, right? It's a trick. It's a mind hack, right? That's the same game, right? It doesn't require it doesn't require Jung to be right about the collective unconscious. Now you could say, well, it only works if there really is something at the the substrate layer that is ancient and spooky. That's an empirical claim that may be unfalsifiable or may be worth debating. But the reality is that stories have power, even if and some stories have more power than others, right? And we can talk about what makes a certain story more compelling or structured in a way that's more compelling. But the reality is that the mind is plastic to a remarkable degree, and our persistence in having the same mediocre experience we had yesterday is a kind of habit. Mm-hmm. And you can create other habits that are more inspiring and more useful. And yes, it is totally possible to use some traditional framework to do that, or some weird cultic framework. I mean, someone can invent a new operating system and call it Scientology or call it whatever, and gather acolytes under that in that context. And even and this is how weird our circumstance is. You can have a malicious fraud doing that, someone like L. Ron Hubbard, who's just clearly a con man, right? And people can derive genuine benefit from it. It's not like every Scientologist is wrong about the benefit they got from Scientology. It's clearly they're not, right? It wouldn't persist to the degree that it has if everyone's just having a bad time and seeing no benefit ever, right? It would be over in a day.
Well, they're sweating all that goo or whatever they're doing in